keyword research, on-page SEO, technical audit, and then ongoing content creation. Are those kind of, your primary areas too? Are you doing any link building? And is there like some new secret sauce that isn't part of that formula that, I don't know about that you can maybe share with me?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the client. I would say typically my process for like, let's say standard SEO client, it would be they come in, we have sort of this upfront strategy process where it's a deep dive into historical performance, on-site user behavior, all like keyword research. And then we put together the technical audit. We put together a blueprint based on that for the next typically 6 or so months. So we sort of know, okay, these are what the core deliverables are going to be for the next 6 months. It's really helpful just because it lets us prioritize a little bit better. And then it leaves us room. We have the opportunity during that 6-month period to shift things around if we need to. But that way we've got like a really solid research foundation. And then when we get to the end of that 6 months, it's a lot easier. We've got the data from that 6-month period under our belts to say, okay, we know what worked, we know what didn't work. And then it's a lot easier when we create the next 6-month blueprint to figure out what those deliverables need to be. So that's like the standard SEO process. And then it does look a little bit different if it's like a website migration, whether it's a domain migration, a website redesign, like any of those different things where I'm coming in from like during that part of the process. And then the other one would be the purely content strategy side where they're not looking for like a holistic SEO partner. They're really just looking for someone to come in and say, what content do we need to be writing? It's a little more on the like positioning, branding, personas side where we're looking at, who are the personas that we need to be talking to? What are the pieces of content that we need to create throughout the, quote unquote user journey to help those folks? So it is SEO. It's sort of born out of the SEO process, but there's also elements of other, channels and research in that as well. So those are sort of the 3 buckets that I would consider what we do.
What do you learn with the first 6 months in terms of data? Like I think about typical campaigns and the whole process. I like to tell people that SEO is very like continually rewarding because as you start to run your own campaign, you're getting new data back from whatever it might be, Search Console, analytics, whatever tools you're using. And you learn that some of the keywords and the ideas you had originally aren't, the winners, but now you've discovered some new ones that you didn't even know existed. So it's a fun way to kind of like roll your data from yourself back into yourself again, if you will. Is that what you have discovered as well? Or how do you take that first 6 months of data and then readjust the plan for, if they want to keep on going?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. I feel like sometimes people think about SEO and they think, okay, I just need somebody to come in one time, tell me what my keyword strategy is going to be, do all the on-page optimization, fix whatever needs to be fixed from a technical perspective. And exactly like you said, that's the reason it has to be ongoing is there's so many levers that we can pull. It's all just this big gray area. It used to be 200 ranking factors, and I'm sure it's far, far more than that now. So it is just this like continuous testing process. So I think it depends on what the initial 6-month strategy is, but it really is looking at like, what types of keywords do we see performing well? What types of pages or even updates to like design, content structure, content architecture? Where did we see success? And then where did we not see success that we either need to shift the approach or just sort of shift the keyword strategy. So I think that's really where all of that comes into play. The other thing is, even if we see that various, levers that we've pulled, if you will, were impactful, it's like which ones made the biggest impact the quickest. So I think it allows us to like prioritize down the road. And it differs per industry. So it differs per industry. It's changing all the time. So even if you do, as you go on, you sort of get a better system in place, it is going to differ by business, by industry, even from year to year. So I think that's why it's important to be flexible in your approach and continue to test and learn from all of that.
Any industries or clients or campaigns acting in a stubborn way, giving you a hard time, having, making you think that we got to readjust our approach again, or there's, like healthcare or finance, like just Google doesn't like this. They don't. We're not allowed to play here. We got to go do something else. Any troubles that you've seen recently that are of concern, and have you had to? Are you able to like overcome them? I mean, maybe the answer is no. Maybe you're like, no, my clients are all good, everything's fine. But I'm wondering if you've seen like significant challenges where you're like, yeah, this we're doing the process here perfectly accurately. I don't know what the problem is. How do you adjust to something that's like really a conundrum?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple of those examples. One would be industries that have gotten really, really competitive the last couple of years. I think during 2020, there was this big influx of folks coming. I think you and I have talked about this, coming into SEO and being like, okay, especially because more people are shopping online, they're just spending more time online. There's a lot of money to be made in SEO. So I think things have gotten more competitive in the last, couple of years since COVID. And just in general, people are more aware now of SEO. So a lot of industries have gotten more competitive. And I think part of it is there are a lot of black hat tactics being used in some of these industries, or even just tactics that are, questionable from a branding perspective. So I think it's difficult when you're competing with folks like that who they're willing to cut corners, or they're willing to take these a little bit, more black hat routes to increasing their visibility. And then, when you have a client who doesn't want to take those types of approaches, and not necessarily that I would recommend that anyway, but like it's bad for their brand. I think it's sort of like, how do you balance those things? So that's one. The other one is I have a couple of clients who are in these really niche markets, and it's tough. I think a lot in the past I've relied on the competitive research, like what are other sites ranking for, what are people searching for, and you get into this space where search volume is really low because you have this very specific group of people that are searching. So it's like, how else can you approach the research process that's a little bit less reliant on just looking at, the search volume side of things? I have this one client who they have this blog that we did for them that performs really well. It's the top traffic generating page on their site. And the keywords that it targets, that it was originally targeting, are like 40 searches a month, but it sends thousands and thousands of sessions every month. So clearly there's just this whole world of opportunity to increase visibility outside of just the, what are the keywords? So I think that is another one that's a little bit challenging, just getting the data to support the strategy on those.
I've been working on a campaign recently, and I discovered during the process that the client has tens of thousands of weird links. And I talked to them about it, and they're like, gosh, that might have been a result of the person we had doing SEO before you. Can you take a look at it and let us know what you think? Have you ever had to disavow or let's say either disavow links or do like a significant cleanup job from someone who came to you after trying to do the black hat shortcuts?
So on the link side, I've done some testing with disavowing in the last couple of years, and I've typically found that, and it's not been too bad. Like, it was an agency, I think, that was like driving a lot of those links. I think they just sort of naturally accumulated some of those spammier links over time. But I have personally found in the last few years that disavowing either did nothing or actually hurt our performance. So I have sort of moved away from disavowing in the last few years. On the general cleanup side, though, I did have a client who had been working with this SEO agency for some time, and they clearly had been using AI to generate this content, which, that in and of itself is not bad, but clearly it had never seen a human editor. So, and it was in the earlier days of AI, so it was just very like nonsensical content. And the whole site was just really suffering. I mean, it was clear that Google was crawling all of these pages, and they were just, deciding not to index them because they were so low quality. So it was sort of this uphill battle of how do we, get the site back in quote unquote Google's good graces again, so that we can start getting our content ranked, and actually indexed before it's even ranked.
Was it just bad English? Like it was like the grammar was bad, like it was like a second grade level or something? Like it wasn't coherent? I mean, I feel like it would take quite a bit for Google to totally disregard something unless it was really bad.
Yes, it was not. I mean, second grade level would be generous. So yeah, it was that sort of thing. And that's actually a trend that I've seen in the last, let's say, year and a half to 2 years. Is I feel like when I am in Google Search Console and I'm looking at, how many pages Google is crawling and not indexing, or even just choosing not to crawl at all, I'm running into it a lot more. And I don't know if this is right, but my theory is there's so much more, honestly, crap content being pushed out by all of these different websites that Google is sort of forced from a resource perspective to be a little bit pickier about what it's crawling, what it's indexing. I don't know if that's for sure what it is, but it does seem like, you really need to be careful about your whole site's quality, and also just individual folders, individual types of content, like what that quality looks like. Because it, from what I've seen, can easily snowball into, okay, Google is just choosing not to crawl some of our new content that we're putting out. And the problem is, I guess less with the black hat side. If you've seen, okay, these spammy black hat tactics were done and we saw our performance suffer, it's easier to make that argument. I think the thing that's tough to make the argument for a client and from an ROI perspective is like, every, let's say, year, we need to be going in and looking at your old content and figuring out what can we prune from the site. Like that ongoing cleanup, I think it's a little bit harder to make the argument for, but I think is so important and probably is only going to become more important.
I don't know if that many business owners see SEO as being a long-term, like a truly long-term play. I think they all want like I'm going to hire this guy for 3 months or 6 months, and then it's going to be magically amazing. And we're going to be ranking on Google for 5 years and 10 years. It's almost in a strange way. If you do SEO, you could just ignore it altogether and maybe it's not part of your business model. But if you do take it somewhat seriously, it's kind of this, you should see it as an overhead of running your business. It's almost like you got to buy your inventory, you got to keep your lights on, you got to like pay your employees, you got to like clean the floors, you got to be doing your SEO correctly for like as long as your doors are open, basically. Like it doesn't ever stop. It just changes and you have to kind of like stay up to date with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and something that I've shifted my perspective on after starting Rebel Cause Digital was, I think it's helpful to frame it to clients in terms of like phases. So obviously I talked about the initial strategy, but exactly to your point, I think it's helpful to be like, okay, we're sort of overhauling things for X period of time. Depends on the size of the site, depends on, the state of the site's SEO going in, but you sort of have this like really heavy lift period. And then on an ongoing basis, it is more of like the maintenance, whether that's just monitoring the site's technical health, definitely ongoing content creation, any like smaller strategic shifts. But yeah, it never really ends, it just changes in terms of the scope and the lift and all of that. So I think that's like, it makes it more digestible to think about it that way. So it's not just like, oh my gosh, we have to just keep. I had a client at one point when we were creating a content calendar for them. She's like, "So we just have to do this forever?" And I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much. You do just have to keep creating content to stay relevant, and even just refreshing old content."
It seems daunting, but it's also satisfying to know it's that simple sometimes, where it's like, oh, okay, just like, here's how to do it the right way. Just make the content, make it good. Don't take any shortcuts. And as long as we're a business, we just basically have to do this as one more thing. I'm happy to hear you say that about the disavowing, because I actually did tell that client to not submit. I actually don't really know. Like, I haven't done that very often, and I don't know what the final say is on that right now. It warns you pretty heavily in Search Console to like take it seriously and maybe not do it. And I did some research online and I kind of found some stories about people saying, like you said, either it didn't really fix anything or sometimes it made the results maybe a little bit worse for them. Uh, I suppose it comes down to whether or not Google sends you a notice in Search Console. I know that they send a notice sometimes saying, we've discovered some links and, take a look at them in X, Y, and Z. So like, unless they reach out to you specifically in some kind of way, I would almost tell people, listen, if your DA is good and you're ranking and you're getting traffic and your lights are on and you're in business, ignore them and just moving forward, do it the right way and don't do any more of those shady tactics. So do you feel the same way, or what is your advice to somebody on the disavowing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously this is not helpful for a business that's already in that position, but that's the reason that yeah, you might see some short-term gains from it, but you're much better off just not taking the risk. Because it can be so hard to recover from. But yeah, I completely agree. And I think the other thing it's tough for folks who are newer to SEO or like the marketers a lot of times in-house who they do some basic SEO as part of their job. You have these tools that we all know and love, and they really, I mean, I would say kind of use fear tactics, like you have this many toxic links and all these things because it's just one more service that they can provide. But I think those types of things are tough because it makes people think, okay, I need to take action on it. I need to be able to report back to somebody else who's looking at this account and tell them that our, toxicity score went down. When in reality, it's usually not something that you need to take action on.
Are you seeing these campaigns that you're creating and that you're overseeing, and these clients that you're working with? What percentage of them would you say are using AI to make all of their content?
That's a great question. Like mentally going through my client roster. Let me think about this.
Or not necessarily. Okay, so let's say all content, or maybe at least outlining and it creates an outline, or like a version one that has to be edited by a human. Like is there
right?
Like who's doing 100% of their stuff as AI and who's using the tools kind of here and there?
Yeah. So none of them that I can think of are doing 100% AI. There's several though that are using it to create content in some capacity. So it kind of depends on the type of content, but typically the process that we'll go through if we're involved in the content creation process, which is for most of them, is that we come up with the keyword strategy, sort of the content calendar. And then we'll go through with the client based on the metrics that we see from like a difficulty perspective or how important a certain topic is for us. And we figure out, do we want to use AI to create this content? And if so, to what degree? So if there's a really competitive high volume keyword that we want to rank for, a lot of times we are using AI to a pretty minimal extent. So we're working more with like experts in house, and we're really working on creating this unique piece of content that's really in depth. For pieces that are more straightforward, a lot of times we create the brief. Either we are actually uploading that brief into some type of AI tool, or we are passing the brief over to the client, and they're using their AI tools to create the content, and then they will have an expert do a final pass through, and then we will do a final pass through from an editing perspective, final optimizations. So it's pretty common for them to use AI. It's just to varying degrees, and I do think you need to be really careful about which pieces you're creating it for, because we have a bunch of pieces of content that we used AI for really heavily, and they're ranking on page 1 for pretty high volume terms, in the top 5 in several cases, but they're not the really competitive ones. The pieces of content that are really high priority to us, we really prioritize in integrating expert perspectives, because I think that helps us stand out.
Is it always as simple as like a long form article, like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 words with a couple of H2s in there, maybe an image, maybe not an image? Or like, are there other content types? Are you doing image heavy content? Are you doing infographics, videos, podcasts? Like, is there something beyond just the written word, or is it just like, nope, just do a couple of long form articles every month and you'll be good to go?
That's a great question. So back to the like more competitive high volume topics that we want to be showing up for, those definitely were including more visual content and more like other media within the piece. But definitely, I think, because AI, yes, it can produce, videos and images, but it's really easy to create a piece of written content with AI. My perspective is for brands to really stand out, incorporating more of those visual mediums is really helpful. I'm lucky enough to work with a company right now who has their own like video production studio, video production team. So we're able to really leverage video a lot more in that space. And then you've got, the on-site SEO for that. You've got the YouTube SEO. They've got a graphics team. And so I think it's really helpful both in terms of just ranking the web page itself and then looking at, okay, how are we appearing off-site, whether it's somebody who's searching on YouTube or if they're still searching in Google, but there are different, there's an image carousel or there's a video carousel. Even people searching, I know this isn't like traditional SEO, but people searching for things on social channels like LinkedIn, getting the visibility out of videos and images across multiple channels. So yeah, I think that definitely goes a long way.
Yeah, I feel like that would be very beneficial. I have spoken with some SEO professionals over the past few months. Some of them you and I both know. And they'll say, no, Paul, you don't need that. You just need an article a couple times a month and everything is going to be fine. And I understand that. And I have seen that work too. But nowadays, I feel like with all this AI stuff, if it's a big if, I'd say right now, if Google gets to a point where they are trying to convince people, I don't know if they can actually do it or not. If they're trying to convince the general population that somehow they can determine the difference between an AI generated piece of content and a human made piece of content, I think it'll become a factor at that point. But either way, even before that, my thought is, and that's why I started this podcast, there's just something so personable. What's the right word here? There's something so human about like a conversation and like using your voice, and then also being on video as well, like somebody in front of a camera, either looking at the camera and talking or demonstrating something. And I know that if you have some kind of content like that on your page as well, like one, on your website, and then two, like you said, put it on LinkedIn, YouTube, all the other channels, that's going to build the authority that you want, but also like the engagement time on your site's going to be higher too. And then that as an SEO factor Google's going to see that in Chrome and analytics and all the other things they're using to harvest our data. And they're going to say, oh, people are staying on this page longer too, because they have a video right there in the middle of it. And I think that kind of thing can only be beneficial. And if you have the capacity to create that kind of extra content, I would definitely advise people to throw that into their, either in the middle of their articles or as a separate, asset altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny, I was listening to, I don't remember who it was. I was listening to an SEO on a podcast recently, and they were talking about like one of the best things that you can do for your SEO, if not the best thing, is just focus on other marketing channels, like create good content, create content that resonates with people, distribute content over social, distribute content over email, just like generally build up your brand. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I have most of my clients are SEO and content, but I do have one client that I'm sort of like their fractional marketing director. SEO is probably less than 10% of what I do for them. And we are checking in on it regularly. We have a keyword strategy. We've been improving the site, but a lot of our focus has just been on, let's get the messaging into a better place. Let's establish the brand online. And even when we're not, doing these sort of traditional SEO initiatives, we have seen the rankings steadily increase over time. So I think it's really important, like you said earlier, to have SEO be part of your overhead, but not also be thinking of like, SEO as existing in a vacuum. It's part of this larger, marketing strategy.
I agree with that. And so right now I've got a white label partner that I'm doing SEO for. And she is also doing additional marketing on top of that for her clients, and she's doing like the newsletter and like the web design and like posting on social and a few other things. And we're already seeing some pretty good results with the SEO. And I'm kind of convinced that it's because of not just the content we're making for the site and like the proper, on page and technical stuff, but all the additional traffic she's driving from the email marketing and some of these other places. And so like the organic traffic is going up and they're getting rankings and things are moving along, but the client is also very, or I should say multiple of them. A couple of clients are also very happy with, they're like, yeah, we're getting a lot of new business right now, like a lot of new phone calls, and just like the general activity they're seeing is going up as well because these people are seeing them in like multiple places. And I think that also, snowballs together into the SEO effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this is not quite the same thing, but my theory is that this is sort of related. I had a client who was pretty early on, like the site didn't really rank for anything when I started working with them. So it was really building everything up from the ground up. They were in a really competitive space. And so we refreshed the keyword strategy. We created some new pages, and with the new pages, they were slow to see traction. And so we decided to just independently, we decided to run some ads. We were like, we've got these new pages. We are confident that the messaging is going to resonate a lot more with our audience. So let's run some Google ads, sort of see what happens. It was like maybe 2 weeks after we launched the Google ads, we saw these pages that we had created from an SEO perspective for our new SEO keyword strategy jump up to the first page of Google after hovering around either not ranking or being on page like 8, 9, 10. And so I'm sure it's a little bit of a factor of, now we know from the DOJ trial and all of that Google uses user engagement signals as a ranking factor. So I'm sure that was part of it, but it was just, it was interesting to see. There's no way those two things were not related. It was like immediately after we launched the ads.
That's a nice experiment you did there on a question that everybody in the game has wanted to know for like the past 15 to 20 years is, hey, I wonder if spending some money on Google's ad platform affects my organic rankings too. And there's been speculation, but even besides what you just mentioned there, I would think that it does, at least from what I've seen on Amazon, like doing SEO for Amazon. I mean, I know the algorithm's not the same, but maybe the concept is the same to some degree. On Amazon, it is very much like if you spend money on their ad platform and like drive some general traffic to your pages, they're going to bump you up for the organic rankings for the keywords as well. I'm like, I know that Google has to have that to some degree in the algorithm as well. But so were you using? Was that the search network? Was that display? Where did you run these ads to kind of get that additional activity and somewhat that SEO boost?
It was definitely search ads. I'm trying to remember if we had the display network enabled, but I think it was search only. And we were really, really targeted with the keyword strategy. So we were going after pretty low volume keywords that we knew the page was going to resonate. So I do wonder sometimes, like, if we had been driving folks to that landing page that were, it's just a little bit less qualified of keywords, if we wouldn't have seen that lift. But I think because, again, this is all just my theory, because we were driving folks that were, they had these very relatively long tail queries, the engagement on the page was pretty good. And then, theoretically, that would be related to the rankings increasing.
Gosh, so many ideas are going through my head right now. I have to do more episodes down the road.
Part 2.
Part 2, part 3. What about, this might seem like a really silly, stupid, simple question. What about social share buttons on your pages? Like, standard share this on Facebook, Twitter, like the easy way for someone to click it and then immediately post it to their profile. Or is that a standard practice for you? Do you have thoughts on that kind of thing?
It's so funny you asked. Somebody was just talking to me about this the other day, and I will be totally honest, I have not thought about that in probably 8 years, like until someone brought it up to me the other day, which is maybe bad. I would love to say that I have research on it. My intuition on it is most folks are just going to go copy the link from their browser and paste it somewhere, or they've got the browser link that they could share, directly from the browser, that they don't need the social share buttons. Um, yeah, like I said, I'd love to have data to back that up, but that's my assumption. I have stopped telling clients to put that on their pages, and I am, probably any of my clients would tell you that I am very annoying with their designers. So when we're creating content, I am very much like, we need to make sure that we have these page elements. We need to make sure that, we've got, depending on the industry, like a table of contents with jump links and all of these different things, but social sharing, not one of them.
I understand. I'm kind of the same way. I try not to annoy the designers too much because I've done a lot of like WordPress design in my life as well, and so I have like a thought process to, like, if this was my website, I would do all of these things exactly this way. But it's like, we're gonna do the low hanging fruit items first, and I'm gonna try to not destroy my relationship with these designers while I'm working for this client. But it's interesting, though. I agree with you. The social sharing buttons were all the rage, like you said, probably 5, 8, 10 years ago. And now it's like, well, either your browser or your phone, or like most humans know how to like take the link and then put it in the platform and hit the send button or like the post button. It's like, I don't need the button on the site to facilitate this. Like, people know how to post things socially. So maybe it's just kind of like an eyesore now. Well, okay. I mean, I agree. So that being said, what if somebody does share something and they take a good article with like a long tail keyword in there, and it's like, oh man, this is a really good article about this topic, and it goes not even like mega viral, but like it gets a couple of thousand views from Twitter, or like 5,000 views from Facebook or something like that. Do you think that also factors into the general SEO equation for Google if they see that kind of thing happening?
That's such a good question. It's tough because there are all these studies that will say, or just Google themselves, although they clearly can't be trusted. Things that they have said have been proven wrong on multiple occasions. But I've seen so many people say it's not a ranking factor, and I think sometimes we forget that there's like what I would consider direct ranking factors, and then there's indirect ranking factors. So to me, it's definitely going to help, even if it's not a direct ranking factor. Getting your content out there, having it get traction, having it get more eyeballs, just building up your brand awareness, having more people searching for your brand, like all of those things are going to be helpful to your SEO, even if it's not like, we're taking LinkedIn likes into direct, as a direct factor in the algorithm. So that's sort of my perspective on it, but I know it's squishy.
What else are you thinking about these days? What else, any kind of secret sauce, or any kind of, or even like, do you have a personal project you're working on for your own brand? Are you trying to, make your own videos or podcast, or, what are you doing like when you're not doing your client work?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. So I spent so much time last year just getting my website ready to launch, and I have definitely paid less attention to it this year. I'm trying to do some content for third parties, like I write a little bit for the American Marketing Association lately, but I really need to focus on it more. I never know on like a LinkedIn platform. I feel like sometimes my posts are a little bit too technical, and then I'm like, who exactly am I talking to here? So it's something that I need to be better at. But in terms of other projects that I'm working on that are a little bit that are not for me but for clients, I have been working on just ways to integrate like AI to make my processes a little bit more efficient. So that's been really fun. I really have enjoyed like finding ways to, the more time consuming tasks for SEO, make them a little bit less time consuming, so that both I and the client can spend more time on strategy and less time on the like, nitty gritty in the weeds stuff. So that's been really fun, especially from a like content research perspective.
Any come to mind right now? Any tools? I've done my own research for the past I don't know. Yeah, this entire year, at least 6 months, 6 to 8 months on anything and everything AI that I can just sort of like play with and log somewhere in like a document for myself. And I've landed on like a few like decent ones that, like you said, they're not taking all the work, but it's just making the whole process for everybody more streamlined. Do you have any that you've discovered recently or that maybe you're using now that are like you recommend to another SEO professional or anyone, I
Yes.
guess, any kind of marketer?
So this is a little bit less on. This is just fresh on my mind because I was working on it earlier today. I have, oop, from a not AI perspective, I have been focusing on finding different like API keys and things to use in Google Sheets to make things easier because I live in Google Sheets like all day, every day. So that's been really fun. I like one example is I've been scraping YouTube videos to figure out for competitors, like what YouTube videos are their competitors creating on a specific topic, and then taking this massive list of URLs and running it through using an API key in Google Sheets. Looking at, okay, what are all the titles of those videos? Similar for social, like what's every LinkedIn post that our competitors have posted that's related to like this industry or this trend or what have you. And then for that, we'll use some AI tools. Like I've actually been using Microsoft Copilot, which I have not used previously, because ChatGPT cannot crawl like LinkedIn posts and things like that. So I've been using Copilot for that. And again, just to sort of analyze these social posts in bulk so that I or somebody that I work with is not going in and, having to look at every single post and figure out how it did and what the topic was and things like that. So I think it just allows the research part to be a lot more scalable, and it's been fun.
Yeah, that's a good topic right there. I have another episode with a guy that I know. His name's Jim Lillig. He went into for a few minutes on what you just said, which is essentially the different AIs or the different LLMs that are out there. They play well with their own software. So like Copilot works well with Excel and Word and like anything Microsoft owned, basically. Google Gemini plays well with, their properties and their apps and their search engine data. And so some of them, like you said, ChatGPT can only do so much, and it can't quite cross the barriers or enter those like closed, playgrounds just yet.
Right.
Although at some point I'm sure that they're all going to be able to like break through fences and that kind of thing and get what they need. But currently, yeah, there's like different AIs that are like whatever company owns the AI, it's going to do well with like that kind of data. So he was saying like use Copilot if you're going to do anything Excel heavy, and then take that and then bring it over to like the Chat GPT to write the content about it or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I have been, back to the topic of my clients using AI for content. They've been finding the new version of ChatGPT really, really helpful, even better than some of the tools that say that they're, specifically AI specifically for writing content. So that's another thing that's been really interesting. I have a couple clients who they used to use AI, but it was a lot more like, all right, I'm going to give this to the AI in parts, and I'm going to rearrange things when it comes out. And the new, what is it, ChatGPT 4.0. Anyway, the new version of ChatGPT has been really effective if you give it a good brief, it can be really effective with creating content.
Do you take on other kinds of work other than your SEO? Let's say, what is it, SEO retainer? And you said kind of a fractional CMO to some degree. Do you, like, if I wanted to hire you or somebody wanted to hire you to, like you said, when you write content, it's kind of technical, it's kind of specific. Would you take on like a content piece and do like a few hours of a freelance writing job? Or would you, let's say like another freelancer, like somebody like us wanted to talk about, their process and getting clients and look over my deliverables and that kind of thing. Would you do any coaching or consulting or anything like that? Do you, I guess I'm just anything here that might be, let's just say, yeah. What else do you do in terms of your service offerings from Rebel? It's Rebel Cause, is that right?
Yep, Rebel Cause Digital. Media.
either through that or, on a personal level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say most of it starts as SEO. So I'll do some of that like fractional, marketing director type of work. But that it really, when I do that now, it's for clients that I started doing their SEO and their content, and then we just sort of figured out that it was going to be a good fit for them. I certainly don't think that I, frankly, would be a good fit for everyone on that. It depends on the business. It depends on their goals. It depends on how much needs to be done. Um, on the other services side, so for agencies, yes, I do a little bit of agency consulting. It's a pretty small portion of what I do, but it's a really good fit for agencies where their teams are a little bit more green, or they've got like folks who they do SEO, but it's not all of what they do. Like maybe they have a content team and they know the SEO basics, but they need somebody to come in and sort of coach them through a strategy or things like that. I will do some agency consulting on that. Aside from that, typically, like I have some folks that I work with who do the content writing. It's typically starting from the SEO perspective. So it might be, we've put together this content calendar and then we're helping to produce the content. Or if it's a website redesign, occasionally we'll help with the content writing for that. Same sort of thing with GA configs, tracking, a little bit of CRO. Like we'll do those things, but it typically is starting with the SEO and the content side.
Where can people find you if you want to put yourself out there?
Yeah, so our website is rebelcausedigital.com. And then on LinkedIn, it is, luckily I have a unique name, so I'm pretty easy to find. It's Sara, Sara, and then my last name is Naatz, N like Nancy, Aatz. I'm on LinkedIn, mainly LinkedIn. That's really I actually got rid of most of my other social platforms. So that's the one where you can find me.